What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I'm Peter Ariz alongside D Money. Hope everyone had a great weekend. As we started a little bit later than normal here, normally go in the morning around lunchtime. For those of you who are new to the channel, this is Group Chat Football Live, Group Chat Sports. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this page. As always, helping us grow big time here the last month plus as we've been going live here every day on Group Chat Football Live. And although the transfer portal is closed up now for the most part and enrollment has pretty much ended at most schools, there's still some pieces here and there, some guys who are entering as grad transfers. Some of the Notre Dame offensive linemen entered last week. We'll keep you guys updated on that. But we've got to talk coaching moves early on here in the show, D. A lot of stuff happened over the weekend when we weren't able to record. Of course, Jim Knowles headed from Ohio State to Penn State. Tom Allen leaving Penn State a few weeks ago. And people were wondering, what are they going to do? How are they going to replace him? Tom Allen headed to Clemson. And boy, did they make a splash.
Yeah, it's that if you look at this, the Penn State defensive coordinators going back a few years, I mean, it is name brand after name brand, whether it's Brent Pry, Manny Diaz, move on to now Tom Allen, who then goes to Clemson, replace him with Knowles. So they've had some of the biggest names in the industry at defensive coordinator. And look, if you're Penn State, you know one thing for sure, and that is that James Franklin is going to recruit the absolute best defensive talent around. Just look at the NFL Combine, look at the NFL Draft. It is freak after freak. The strength and conditioning program at Penn State is second to none. So, these are all, of course, big-name defensive coordinators on their own. But when you combine that with the talent that they get through the Penn State machine of talent acquisition, development, strength and conditioning, you get perennial top 10 defenses. I expect that to continue with Jim Knowles. Of course, you got a ton of talent moving on. Abdul Carter, others, but you bring back Zane Durant, deny Dennis Sutton. You got guys, Rojas, and you're going to continue to recruit and develop that level of player. So I think from a, Jim Knowles standpoint, if you're getting a significant pay raise, he's a Philadelphia native, not that close to Happy Valley, but close enough. And that the talent is going to be coming steadily. You got proof of concept from the last three guys. Safe, smart decision if you want to get paid and if you're leaving the reigning national champion, which itself is a pretty unusual move.
And this leaves us to the next thing, which is, of course, what's next for Ohio State. Look, we saw the report last week where Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, potentially we're looking at the transfer portal. Carnell Tate, it's been announced that he's coming back. Jeremiah Smith has tweeted that he has, that it looks like he's staying. Right, at least for the time being. But when you're the champ, people are gonna come at you and come for your best assets. That's exactly what happened here with Penn State doing just that. So how does Ryan Day reload here in terms of the defensive coordinator search? I'm sure it's going to be a highly coveted position, but some names have already emerged for that spot.
Yeah, just in general, when you're Ohio State, you're in that category with Georgia, Alabama. We'll throw Texas into the mix now, where you expect, because of the level of recruiting, the talent to reload. Now, there's a lot of talent walking out the door, particularly in the front seven. But you got some good news. You got Sonny Styles back. You got Igbinosun back. So you got some very good players coming back. And, of course, Caleb Downs, you can safely project him as probably the best defensive player in the country for 2025, or, right there in the conversation. That's a nice nucleus to start. You'll get a lot of young talent. The question now is, do you go with continuity or do you go and get a big name? So some of the names to keep an eye on, that names that have been discussed publicly, Matt Guerrieri, who is considered by many the leading internal candidate to replace Knowles. Just reading the quote from Ryan Day talking about him. One of the brightest minds in college football, and I'm telling you, a star in the making. Only 35 years old, so he's a young buck. He's from Ohio originally, played at Davidson, spent 10 years at Duke, analyst with Ohio State for a year in 2022, so he knows that Knowles defense, then calls Indiana's defense for a year, comes back to Ohio State last year as a safeties coach. So the familiarity with the defense is there. Being with Knowles 2 out of those 3 years, he does have experience as a play caller on defense, although, it's not like Indiana was setting the world on fire in 2023, but this is a 35-year-old with a lot of upside. So you're combining kind of the upside plus the familiarity and the continuity effect. I could see the fit. Again, you look at what happened at Duke when he was there in Indiana, these were not elite defenses. So that's going to be the negative. But at least what you're getting from a personal standpoint because he's been in the building.
Then, as we keep things moving, obviously he would be an intriguing option because he understands the system. He has familiarity with the players, familiarity with the program. He knows what the expectations are, having been there, having won the championship. But of course, there is also the option to go outside of the program and pluck someone from another big time program. And a name that's been popping up here is Chris Hampton from Oregon.
Yeah, originally from the South. You'll play to South Carolina, then goes out with Dan Lanning to Oregon, leaving Tulane. Well, first of all, he's at the defensive coordinator at Tulane for 2 years. And that was when they beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. That was when Tulane was really, really rolling. Then goes out there with Dan Lanning. He was 247's number one recruiter in the class of 2025 as far as assistant coaches. You look at the precedent. Ohio State got their running back coach from Oregon, their biggest Big Ten rival. It sounds so weird to say that, but obviously it's a fact. Their biggest Big Ten rival right now in terms of, where the two programs are. I guess you have to throw Michigan in the mix, and it's their biggest rival in truth. But, Oregon and Ohio State right now, that's kind of the power clash in the Big Ten. So they went and got Carlos Loughlin from Oregon before. He's their running back coach. Maybe go back and get Chris Hampton. You look at his history. He was at Arkansas State. He was at Georgia Tech, Central Arkansas, McNeese State, again, all around the South and the Southeast before getting to Tulane, where he had that standout performance as a DC. He's learning under one of the best in Dan Lanning. He knows the conference. You could see that one as another one where with upside, with some familiarity, although it's not as much familiarity with the scheme he just had, as compared to like a Gary Airy who was here in the building. So similar kind of riser, a little more experience as a play caller and success as a play caller, but less familiarity with the personnel in the building and the scheme in the building.
And then the next name here, Tim Walton, a guy who has a ton of experience in coaching, has been in the NFL for a while, was at Ohio State, since 2022, but this is a guy who's really seen everything in terms of the NFL game, the collegiate game, and has experience calling defenses as well.
And we know that Ryan Day likes NFL guys. I mean, look what he just did with Chip Kelly and the success that he's had with him. Of course, Chip Kelly now rumored potentially for the Texans job. We'll see how that develops. But Ryan Day likes the NFL. Tim Walton had 11 seasons in the NFL before going to Ohio State in 2022. Before that was a college coach, though. We saw him here at University of Miami. Always been more of a defensive backs type coach, but does have experience as a play caller, call plays on defense in the NFL for Jeff Fisher, also at Miami and at Memphis. So he's been around. He's called plays. He has experience. He's another one who's familiar with the scheme, with the personnel. He's been in the building as Ohio State secondary coach, but maybe less of the theoretical upside of a Gary Airy, who's a younger individual. Walton, he's been around. So that to me is an interesting fit. We got a question here from Arab. Any chance that Walton comes back to the U? That to me would be more of a lateral move. I think if this guy goes anywhere, he's going to want to be a defensive coordinator calling plays or a head coach, because if you're the secondary coach for Ohio State, you're going to be coaching first rounders year in and year out, and you're going to be feeling pretty good about it. So those are some names that just make sense. It's going to come down to, what does Ryan Day value? The upside, the familiarity with personnel, the familiarity with scheme, familiarity with the conference, or does he just go totally off the board like he did with Chip Kelly and get someone that no one really expects to come in the program?
Well, and we're talking about these guys who are on staff, such as Gary Airy, Walton, and you assume that they stay because they have had such a big impact and they're being even talked about in this job, right? But you bring in a different coordinator that comes from the outside and they have their own people they want to bring with them at a certain spot. I'm sure there will be holdover, whoever comes in, but it just makes you wonder. We're talking about kind of the dominoes that are falling here and what openings are still out there, what openings are still becoming available. And I think these sort of things are interesting to keep an eye on as we see who takes this Ohio State job.
Yeah, one more name I should mention that's been discussed, Phil Parker, Iowa's defensive coordinator, another Big Ten guy, totally different than Gary Area as far as being, a young guy with upside. This is somebody who's been around the block, 14 years as a DC, 13 years coaching defensive backs at Iowa. And Iowa's become not only a consistently great defense and defensive program, they've become a DB factory. You look at some of the Big Ten DBs of the year since 2012, Cooper DeJean, who we just saw here in the NFC Championship game, Riley Moss, Amani Hooker, Josh Jackson, Desmond King, Micah Hyde. Stone from Baltimore is not even on that list, but he's another really, really good player. So Phil Parker has turned Iowa, which is not in the middle of a DB hotbed, right, from a high school personnel standpoint, into a DB hotbed. So that speaks to his evaluation skills, his ability to develop guys. If you're at Ohio State, you know that the talent's going to be coming in there, particularly at that position. He's going to do a great job there. But also, as far as coordinating an entire defense that plays with physicality and discipline, he's done that at Iowa consistently, knows the conference. I think if you're trying to win the championship next year, or if you're Ohio State, you're not trying to build too far in the future. You're always going to try to be a national championship contender. You always want to beat Michigan. Parker's a great choice.
Yeah, without a doubt. And look, Ryan Day is going to have his choice, right? It's going to be on him to make the right call. Obviously, it worked out with Chip Kelly when people might have questioned it. So we'll see what happens there. But interesting situation to keep an eye on for the reigning champs. So looking at a recruiting story that popped last night, Florida State loses a big one for the 2026 class, and that's quarterback Brady Smiel. He decommits from the Noles, number 36 overall player, number 4 quarterback, pocket passing quarterback, I should say. But we'll pull up the tape here. 6'5", a guy who's put up a ton of numbers out in California his first few years of high school football. Dual sport athlete, plays basketball as well. And you'll see that there's a pretty big list of who's who in terms of big programs after him right now that are in the mix. But Florida State had been committed there for a while, and he's no longer committed there.
Yeah, I think the scheme fit, right? I mean, you saw Luke Kromenhoek go out the door and go to Mississippi State, a very talented young quarterback that Norvell had signed. So I think you're seeing talented quarterbacks move on because of the fit, and they'll be replaced by hopefully similarly talented quarterbacks if you're a Florida State fan that are more of a fit for what Gus Malzahn wants to do. You look at Smiel, tall, really can run when he gets going, but he is not at all what you would call a running quarterback. Extremely productive in terms of what he did down there in Southern California, closer to Malibu area by Los Angeles. He kind of reminds me, when you watch him throw, it reminds me of when Aaron Rodgers came out of that Jeff Tedford system and he held the ball high. He kind of had a unique way to hold the ball and throw the football. And that was taken out of him when he got to the pro level, but he definitely had that at Cal. Smiel, very productive, great character reviews from everybody who's been around the kid. Coach's son, put up numbers, did very well in camps. You mentioned the basketball background. I just think if you're Florida State and you look at, again, you see him moving around here, for a passing quarterback, that's good athleticism, but we're not talking about Nick Marshall. We're not talking about Cam Newton. We're not talking about what you typically see from a Gus Malzahn quarterback. And I think going forward at Florida State, as long as Gus Malzahn is there with significant influence over the offense, you are going to see a trend away from this type of player, away from the Luke Kromenhoeks of the world, and more.
So now he's the second highest ranked uncommitted quarterback after Jared Curtis, who we've spoken about here on Group Chat Football Live. Again, pretty much everyone in the country wants him. But taking a look at some of these other schools now in the mix for him, as I pulled a tweet up, Hayes Fawcett posted this yesterday, but you see it there. Michigan State, Washington, South Carolina, who they're loading up that quarterback room. It's an impressive group of talent there right now. Ohio State, Michigan, UCLA. So obviously plenty of options here. Chip Kelly just recently visited Smiel. So it looks like he's probably going to be speeding up this decision-making process here, as we understand most of these top quarterbacks like to get in committed early, get the class around them, get some skilled position guys, get some offensive linemen on the offensive side of the ball, and get the momentum of the class going as early as possible.
Yeah, Ohio State makes a lot of sense here. You got Tavis St. Clair last year, one of the top quarterbacks in the class of 2025, big, physical, prototypical in many ways. Replace him with another guy who's like Tavis St. Clair, a pocket passer with athleticism, not necessarily someone who is, run first by any stretch, but very much prototypical from a size standpoint, from a just style of play standpoint. And the arm strength is there. The accuracy is there. I could see you get Julian Sain, Tavis St. Clair, and now Smiel. You got 3 years in a row of quarterbacks that you don't have to change the whole offense for what they do. They all play pretty similarly. Different body types, different shapes and sizes. Sain a little smaller, less pure arm strength, very cerebral, another California kid. St. Clair, very much exactly how you draw it up. And then Smiel, tall pocket passer. Again, if you get those 3 in a row, there you see him throwing outside the hashes with velocity. If you can get these 3 in a row at Ohio State, you're feeling good that you don't need to bring in a Will Howard, although, of course, that worked out pretty well for him, right? But you can develop in-house, which is more what you're used to seeing from an Ohio State with like a guy like C.J. Stroud, who also came from California.
Florida State fans, that was not good news for you, but just moments ago, just picked up a commitment from running back Amari Clemens, and an early top 10 class for the Noles for next class. So again, not all bad news for Florida State here, as I'll pull up the tape in just a second. Amari Clemens, the track times don't, to me, reflect what it looks like on tape. I pulled up his tape as soon as he committed. I said, man, this guy looks fast. And then the track times didn't necessarily reflect that, but good size on him. You see him there with Mike Norvell, and a guy that they get locked in early here for the next recruiting class.
Yeah, good looking player. He seems to have a lot of size. You look at the measurables. According to 247, he measured in on his visit at 6 foot 188. He's been to FSU the past 2 weekends, ultimately commits from Marietta, Florida, Jackson County. That's right there on the panhandle, right there on the northern border of Florida. And watching the tape, like you said, the track times don't blow you away, 11.57 in the 100 meters. But he's able to get upfield, get his shoulder square, one-cut type runner. He's not someone who's going to make like the Reggie Bush type highlight reel plays in the open field, but he's an efficient cutter in the open field. He doesn't waste a lot of movement and is able to break off big runs. And he looks big and sturdy. So that's 6 foot 188. To me, that seems pretty accurate. You can see this guy being a 200-pound player once he gets on campus. And if you're Florida State, move into this Gus Malzahn style of offense. You're not going to get the Cromanhawks of the world or the Brady Smiels. You'll get a different kind of quarterback, but you'll also really, really do a nice job recruiting running backs, and you'll need a lot of running backs. You'll need a stable. You got Cromwell last year, who's outstanding, really only 2 hours away from where you are getting Clemens there in southern part of Georgia, northern part of Florida. This is your sweet spot, and you're able to get 2 guys that fit your system. You listen to what Clemens said to 247. He said, doesn't feel like a recruitment process with them. I'm comfortable. It's close to home. I won't be the one to say I'm changing the program because there's great athletes there, but I feel like I can be part of that team and help the program get to where it was at. He said he's shutting down the process. So, again, this is the new look. This is I don't want to say the Malzahn era because it's still Mike Norvell's team, but I think you're going to see it start to build in this way with multiple 4-star backs. Seem to be really focusing on that area within 2 hours from campus, and just overwhelming teams with pace, with running backs that should be on paper a superior quality to what Malzahn had at Florida State, at UCF, much more comparable to what he had at Auburn. And then the missing piece will be that young, athletic running quarterback.
Yeah, no, this looks like a nice player though for Florida State early in the class here. And again, man, you see it once he gets to the open field. He's a big back, but he's pulling away from defenders.
Nice strides. Again, verified 6 foot according to 247. I wouldn't push back looking at his size here on film. And this is an area where you get some pretty good players.
It's almost like he's setting up the defenders to cut that back inside.
Yeah, no, in the open field, he can do some damage without being overly spectacular. Just an efficient back. He's highly productive. You look at the FSU class, you got Ephraim White, Darion Williams, Darrell Bell, Tadarius Hughes, who I saw a couple weeks ago, big athletic defensive back, Xavier Payne. Get that running quarterback to fit into this class, and now you're starting to build what, if you're an FSU fan, is hopefully something to last, where you have a specific system, you recruit to that system, you're able to get the best of the best players that fit into that particular system, and just keep reloading and presenting an unusual look to teams in the ACC that get overwhelmed by the pace and the depth at running back.
So, D, in today's era of NIL and transfer portal, the term talent acquisition is used a lot by coaches, the staffs that they put around them to bring this talent in, because it's high school talent, it's portal talent. Obviously, Ohio State does as good of a job as anybody because they are the national champions now, and they've done it in this era. But I would argue the program who's doing it better than anybody right now is Oregon, and they set themselves up with this past weekend, the junior day that they just had, to continue that trend. As I want to go through a list of these visitors that were on campus in Eugene for them over the weekend. And it's extremely elite. We'll pull up some huddles here and just go down the list, and we'll get into a 2027 name as well. But right off the top here, we have to start with Brandon Arrington, the number 18 player in the country, 6'2", 180, dash he goes by. This is a guy who plays both ways, corner, receiver. He's long, he's tall, he's fast, 10.4 300-meter personal best, can play in the return game. And as I pull his highlights up here, you'll see the speed we're talking about.
Yeah, two-way player. To me, I think corner is a more natural fit. I know 247 was saying more receiver. To me, he's a corner, 6'2", 180. You look at his body type, it's gangly. You could see him gaining weight. It's not a frail 6'2". It's a strong 6'2" that can gain some weight. The 100-meter and the 200-meter are just off the charts. He's got a lot of moving parts when he moves around, but he's not stiff. I think he's someone you're going to see him get stronger, even more athletic than he already is. Just the rare 5-star player that I think has a lot of developmental upside. He's going to, I think he can make an instant impact, but I think more so than other guys ranked around his place, I think he can get a lot better. And I say that in a good way. From the San Diego area, his competition just is not, I wouldn't say it's elite, but he does what you're supposed to do. He's not soft. He has some strike to him, some physicality to him. He can locate the football. You do see him, when he's playing receiver, I would say he's not a natural plucker of the football. He fights it a little bit, but the speed, once he catches it, is just off the charts. If you look at Oregon, I agree with you, Pete. I think that is the number one talent acquisition program in the country right now. When you consider that they're not in a talent hotbed and they can just have guys show up at their door, they got to go and recruit. And when you add guys like, Mekhi Hughes in the portal from Tulane, to Corian Moore, who I think is going to be this year's Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams based on instant impact potential. You get guys of that caliber, Naeem Offord, and then some of these names we're going over here as potential Ducks. It's hard to beat what they're doing right now. And I think this player fits in like a glove when it comes to the cornerback position. And who knows, maybe even runs track. I don't know if he's able to do that at a place like Oregon, which is so elite in that department. But man, 10-2 in high school as a junior, you're flying.
Yeah, and listen, it's going to be a big-time battle. They've got A&M, USC that they're dealing with. USC, of course, always going to be in the mix for those top guys out that way. But he's a top priority for Oregon right now, and he was there this weekend. So keeping it moving here to a player who's committed to the Ducks, and that's tight end Kendre Harrison out of North Carolina. And this is a really intriguing prospect. So I'll pull up these clips here, and this is a single game highlight, right? So this is not just cherry pick plays, but you see his frame at 6'7", 243, and you're thinking, man, he's this guy who they're going to just throw the ball up to down the field vertically and let him go win jump balls. But this is a really smooth athlete, can do some things after the catch, is for not being fully filled out in terms of his frame, is a willing blocker, seems like a tough player, right? So you see these again. This is a single game clip, but what a smooth looking athlete here.
Yeah, Oregon commit, so he's already in the boat. 6'7", 243, 5-star from North Carolina, Greensboro area. So you're talking about, not exactly around the corner for the Oregon Ducks and Dan Lanning. But my notes when I looked at him, man among boys, first thing in the note, very strong build for a basketball player. Sometimes you see these basketball players and they're very much, athletic, but you can knock them over. This guy's got some sturdiness and strength to him. Good speed, beast after the catch. His basketball highlights are just unreal. I mean, this guy's a real basketball player. He's not just a football player out there knocking people around. He can jump. He can play basketball. He's a big-time athlete from a basketball standpoint as well. But I agree with the move to football. I think that's where he fits best. Yeah, and I think when you put the size and strength together, he really, we had some pretty good tight ends last year, but I don't think there were any tight end that had this combination of the height, the physical thickness, and then the speed and physicality after the catch, along with the coordination to go up and get it if he needs to. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just, every time I had to watch, I watch these clips multiple times because you're expecting a stiffness at someone at that size, and I just don't see it with him in terms of that stiff. There's no stiffness.
Plucks the ball, makes someone miss, falls forward with physicality. I mean, you just on that one player you just saw right there, you see multiple elements. And I think, again, you had some talented tight ends last year, but they all had holes in their game. This is somebody who, if it all comes together like you think it should with a great developmental staff, you're talking about a first-round pick.
Yeah, no, I'm in big time agreement there. Imagine when this kid hits the collegiate weight room too. It's gonna be pretty scary for him. Sergeant Morhew, appreciate you hopping on with us today. And guys, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Group Chat Football Live coming at you every day as we break down some of these visitors that were at Oregon over the weekend for their junior day. And the next one up here is Chris Henry Jr., who's currently an Ohio State commit, the number 3 player in the class, according to the 247 composite, which, of course, combines all of the major recruiting services rankings. The number 1 wide receiver. This guy's 6'5", 6'6", another one with movement ability. And, I mean, look, Oregon trying to do what they can to flip him as he was there over the weekend.
Yeah, smooth as silk. You got Decorian Moore in the class of 25, who, again, I think is day one, similar to a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams, that he'll be a name brand for college football fans in his first year. I can't say enough about him. Reminds me of Jamar Chase. Chris Henry, totally different type of receiver, 6'5". Some people say he's 6'6" now. But for that height, coming out of the Cincinnati area, not playing at Mater Day, he's extremely smooth. Excellent stop and start for his height. A lot of times with these tall guys, it takes them a while to gear up, gear down. What to me makes Henry special is his ability to stop and start with all those, with those long legs and everything else. Catches the ball with his hands, can accelerate. His father, of course, the late Chris Henry, remember from the Cincinnati Bengals, is why he's from Cincinnati. His sister is a signee on the Ohio State women's basketball team for 24. So that might be able, that might impact Oregon's ability to flip him, depending if he wants to be away from his sister or not. But, if he's obviously taken that visit for a reason, he has interest, and this would be a home run for Oregon, which when you watch the game against Ohio State, there was to me a clear, Oregon had good receivers, and Evan Stewart was out. You'll get him back this year. So there were some reasons for it besides just who's on the roster. But I think there's been a clear difference between what Oregon has at receiver, which is good, and when you have full strength, very good, versus Ohio State, which is consistently elite. So if you start getting the Decorian Moores and the Chris Henrys of the world, now that balance of power shifts.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm sure, look, Ohio State, you understand that Jeremiah Smith still has a couple years that he has of eligibility there. So there's a possibility these two could play together. And you see him teaming up with Jeremiah Smith or him teaming up with Decory Moore, which we haven't seen him in action at the collegiate level yet, but we are expecting him to be really special. So either one of those combinations could be pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, this is why we say one of the best talent acquisition programs, if not the best in the country. They're going after the big dogs. You win some, you lose some, but you can't catch the fish if the bait's not in the water.
So the next player we're going to talk about here, someone who out of all these prospects, probably the least heralded. He's a 3-star recruit currently, but that's Jax Tanner, offensive lineman out of Meridian, Idaho, and he was the Gatorade player of the year in Idaho. So he's playing right tackle here in these clips, probably an interior lineman, but shot put and discus thrower. And Oregon, we understand year after year the offensive line talent that they seem to keep over there. And this is a guy who you see the nastiness come out on tape.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing about, look at the twitch too off the line.
Yeah, really good athlete.
When you're a national program like Oregon, you can go anywhere. Idaho really, in terms of in the big picture, is not that far from Eugene compared to some of these other places that they're going to get to grab players. And you see with Tanner, the track and field background, the shot put, the discus, you see that power in his hands. He's not overly tall. He's tall enough. Interior, he's fine. And he has that body type where you can see him putting on some weight, right? He's listed at 275. He looks like a lean, athletic 275. And you cannot fix that finish, or you can't coach that finish and that aggressiveness if it's not there. So to me, you see guys from this area, right? Whether it's Idaho, South Dakota, North Dakota, you see guys from this area make it to the NFL. Spencer Brown is one that we just saw here for the Buffalo Bills. So I think it's smart to identify the best players from that region and make sure that you're involved.
Yeah, and look, it's interesting because his list of offers isn't the most insane thing you've ever seen. Boise State, obviously local there, Boston College, BYU, Cal. So Michigan, they're on him. So that's one of the bigger schools. But again, 3-star recruit here, and it looks like Oregon might be on him earlier than others. But I'd expect his recruitment to take off based on a lot of these clips here.
Yeah, by the way, Spencer Brown actually from Iowa, but we'll put it all in the same category, right? This is an area where Iowa and Wisconsin typically live, or the North Dakota states of the world if someone is more of a project. So Oregon is saying, hey, we're not just going to cede this area to our now Big Ten compatriots. We are going to make sure we're a presence there. You get like a guy like Josh Connerly, who is now moving on to the NFL, Penei Sewell, Jackson Powers, Jackson Johnson. So you have so many guys that you could point to as products of this program. You're able to now recruit all over the country. I think Idaho, that's almost home turf. So I'm glad they're digging in to somebody who maybe the recruiting services are a little behind on.
Next guy to talk about here, and a couple more left. Maybe my favorite of the bunch, just watching the tape, and that's Talanoa Elely, 52nd ranked player in the country on the 247 composite, number 3 linebacker in the class. And to me, modern day do-it-all linebacker, 6'3", 215, from Orange Lutheran High School in Orange, California. Ohio State, Oklahoma, USC, all in the mix with Oregon. And as I turn on the tape, this is a guy who, this is a single game highlight I'll play against, which I like watching these because you see more of it's less of just the highlights of a linebacker, for example, going and hitting hard, but you can see them do certain things, and you see his fluidity and coverage here. You see him as a spy on the quarterback, which is so important at the linebacker spot these days. And then you see him as a blitzer as well. So I'll pull it up here, and this is against St. John Bosco. So really good program out there. So you get a good idea of what he can do in these clips here.
Yeah, and if you're Oregon, California is now your territory. USC is not what it once was. They recruited a little better last year, but I would say USC as a recruiting power significantly weakened. Really, all those West Coast teams, Oregon is the top dog in that area. So I expect them to be a bully when it comes to California recruiting with these elite guys. You saw it with Aiden Breland last year. Kayvon Thibodeau, of course, one of the best defensive players to come out of Southern California in recent years, ends up being a top 5 pick for the Oregon Ducks. So I think what you're seeing is Dan Lanning saying, yeah, we'll recruit all over the country, but California is going to become Duck territory when it comes to these 5-star, big-time, borderline 4-star, 5-star, what do you want to call it? The big-time national recruits. If they're in California, Southern, Northern California, Central California, it doesn't matter. We are going to be a major player for them, and we're going to consider ourselves the favorite because they really are the top dogs on the West Coast right now.
Yeah, and again, you see these clips, man. Complete all-around linebacker. He can run, he can cover, and I just there's a reason that Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oregon, USC are all in on this guy.
Yeah, and it's always nice to see look at that sideline to sideline ability. When you see the hair flying, right? That's always pretty cool. I think of Noah Sewell, Polynesian linebacker, had a lot of success with the Oregon Ducks. That's a community that they've had success with and can point to examples of guys that have had prosperous careers there. That is important with that community. So again, it makes a lot of sense for Oregon to plant the flag. They are one of the top programs in the country.
And then the last name we'll talk about here, Josiah Molden, 2027 class. So he still has a couple years away here. He is the brother of Elijah Molden, who played at Washington, but their father, Alex Molden, played at Oregon and is an Oregon Hall of Famer, was a first-round pick. And Josiah is this number 68 player in the country, number 9 corner, number 1 player in the state of Oregon, which if you're Oregon, you want to have that feather in your cap, get the best player in the state always. But as I pull up the tape here, this is a feisty, physical corner, a willing tackler, and someone you can just tell by the tape it has high football IQ, which no surprise considering his dad played and was a first-round pick, and his brother is doing it at a very high level in the NFL as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when Alex Molden got drafted. This is when I first started really following the draft. I'm almost 40, so it's been a while. But his dad was a hell of a player. I want to say he was a top 10 pick at the cornerback position. This is when Oregon had the old green and yellow uniforms. Not when they had all the combos that they have today. But you talk about the cornerback position, right? Naeem Offord, some of the guys that Oregon has brought in on the outside. This would be a tremendous fit for them. I think it's a no-brainer, obviously, given the ties. You did lose his other son, so it's not a guaranteed get. But, I mean, with the way Oregon's recruiting and the fact they got him on campus early with so many other big-timers, it makes a lot of sense. He's already wearing the green uniform, right? Kind of looks like Oregon Duck colors already. But you see, this is a natural corner, the change of direction. Look at the finish with the explosive tackle. A lot of you see this, right, with the sons of great cornerbacks. We've seen it here in South Florida. It seems like a program like American Heritage down here in South Florida, all these first-round cornerbacks, second-round cornerbacks, their sons follow in their footsteps, like Pat Surtain and others. So this is someone who's been well-schooled, well-coached, has the genetics, already showing it at a younger age. And if you're Oregon, you don't have a ton of legacies, maybe like some of these other programs, but this is one you got to get.
Well, it's such a technique-driven position, right? Obviously, we see a lot of great athletes who pick it up later in their career, so to speak. Maybe they were receivers primarily, and they flip over to that side of the ball. And once they get that technique down, so if you have it, and you see the football IQ, you see the eyes, and I mean he plays with that physicality. He's not the biggest corner in the world, but he definitely plays like it.
Yeah, his brother was very much a complete cornerback. And that's one thing, you watch Washington maybe here because there are those ties. Washington's had a lot of success producing defensive backs, probably, I'd say certainly more than Oregon over the past decade or so. So maybe watch that. But to me, if you're Oregon, if you're rolling, this is like low-hanging fruit to you with the kind of big game hunting you're doing at some of these other positions in some of these other regions.
Have almost we have over 30 live with us here on Group Chat Football Live. Appreciate everyone who's been on with us. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, our channel, Group Chat Sports. So we have our daily show here, Group Chat Football Live. But we have a bunch of other stuff coming, so stay tuned for that. And we'll wrap up today's show with one more commitment for the 2026 class. That's a program that's getting a lot of buzz for this class, man. I give the head coach here a lot of credit, and that's Fran Brown for Syracuse for really laying the groundwork for this class when he first came in. And I think we're about to see the dividends paid. So today we'll talk about Jaras Rogers, who just popped out of Fleming Island, Florida. And this is a long, athletic pass rusher, listed at 6'5", 193. So needs to put some weight on, obviously. But you can't teach some of these traits here as we play the tape here in just a second.
Yeah, Fran Brown, loving the state of Florida. Right, you had Oronde Gadsden last year, one of your best players from the state of Florida. And look at the recruiting class in 26. He's making a big move with Calvin Russell, 5-star player from Miami Northwestern. His teammate, another top 100 player, Javari Flowers, another guy that Syracuse has had their eye on. These are guys they're after hard, but this is one in the boat, a 4-star player, Jaras Rogers, choosing Syracuse over FSU, Kentucky, Michigan State, Fleming Island. Watching this guy play, he just seems like the kind of guy that if it comes together, you're talking about him high in the NFL draft. It's that kind of ceiling for this player. 6'5", 215. Doesn't really look 215. I know 247 says 193. I'd be curious the actual measurements on him. But we know verified with laser timing, 11.38 in the 100 meters, which is absolutely flying. 22.42 PR in the 200 meters. These are wide receiver times, right? He's faster than a lot of running backs that you see signed in the ACC. Frame-wise, think of Fadil Diggs, who they had this year, the Texas A&M transfer, was very, very productive for him. Not the biggest guy in the world as far as girth, but someone with length and athleticism. Watching the highlights, you do see he's a little bit maybe top heavy as far as the way he moves. He's not necessarily the most bendy guy in the world, but when you have that kind of speed, you can get away with so much. And you do see spin moves on his highlights. You do see an ability to dip right there on the highlights. So you see enough movement skills to go along with the elite straight line speed and length at the position. And if it all comes together and the strength comes on and the size comes on, the weight comes on, this is an NFL type projection. And man, I mean, FSU, Miami, UF, they don't want to be looking at another guy like Oronde Gadsden where they go back and say, how did this guy leave the state of Florida? But we could be looking at something like that with Rogers.
Yeah, USF wanted him as well. So, I mean, UCF, obviously a really good program too. So this is a nice get for Fran Brown. And I'm telling you, I would not be surprised. You mentioned some of these guys from South Florida that have been really big on Syracuse, but I think that they're going to finish with a top 20 to 25 class this year, which might seem a little bold, but I think that that's the sort of trajectory they're on.
And this is the exact kind of guy Fran Brown needs to get. Somebody, you're not going to get this player on a regular basis in upstate New York, right? It's just the speed, the upside, it's just hard to find. So to get, make inroads in Florida, being first on guys, because this guy has a great senior year. He's already a 4-star player, so it's not like he's a sleeper. But this guy's a big senior year, puts on weight. There's going to be more schools in the SEC and the ACC in state calling on him. So Fran Brown will have that relationship early. He'll have his claws in this guy early, and that's what he needs to do. He needs to be first. You can't be late if you're Syracuse. You got to be first. And again, there's a 4-star player, but we've seen this before. I think of Pat Payton, the guy who signed with FSU, similar body type, ended up now at LSU as one of the top-ranked transfers in the portal. When these guys have success, these tall, very athletic pass rushers, and maybe weight comes on, the stats come on, a lot of schools start circling. So you want to be early. Fran Brown does it with somebody with NFL upside.
And I said that, it wouldn't be crazy to think that they finished top 20, top 25. They're number 11 right now for the 26 class. Very early. 9 commits. And Jaras Rogers, according to 247, is right at the top of that list right now as their highest rated recruit with a 4-star rating and a 90 rating on 247. So he is right now the crown jewel of the class, according to the ratings. Their second rated recruit in the class right now is Javion Cooper from Melbourne Central Catholic in Melbourne, Florida. So the top 2 recruits in the class right now, Florida guys, and expect Fran Brown to continue doing work in Florida.
Yeah, and by the way, so I mean the distance from Melbourne to Fleming Island, not terrible. I mean, you're talking about Fleming Island closer to Jacksonville, so that east coast of Florida, from Jacksonville right down to the Space Coast in Melbourne, and then down to South Florida where you're after Javari Flowers, Calvin Russell. You're covering basically the entire East Coast of Florida. If he could do that, he's going to win a lot of games.
No doubt. Well, we appreciate everyone who's been on with us today on Group Chat Football Live, our daily show talking transfer portal, recruiting that you see we're going to be getting a lot more into it as some of these top prospects for the next recruiting class start to make their decisions. And we got the camp circuit. So a lot of guys will be emerging that we maybe haven't heard much about. So we'll be all over it here on Group Chat Football Live. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for tuning in today. See you tomorrow.